Tonight, from former president to future president.
Politics is tough. It is a nice world today.
Donald Trump returns to the White House. And as the president-elect builds out his White House transition team, new leadership on Capitol Hill takes shape. Who will lead the newly elected Republican-controlled Senate? Plus, building connections to prevent tragedy.
I was going to attack either my school or a mall food court. Really didn't matter to me which one.
The Christian ministry working to stop mass shootings. All this and more tonight on Faith Nation. A White House tradition reinstated with a face-to-face Oval Office meeting between President Joe Biden and President-elect Donald Trump. Good evening and welcome to Faith Nation in Washington. I'm John Jessup. Well, a moment that was months in the making. Once political foes, Mr. Biden and Mr. Trump shaking hands after a chaotic and historic election. President Biden then congratulated his former opponent, and the two leaders promised a peaceful transition of power.
Do everything we can to make sure you're accommodated, what you need, and we're going to get a chance to talk about some of that today. So
Good.
Welcome
Thank
back.
you, Jen. Thank you very much. And politics is tough, and it's many cases not a very nice world, but it is a nice world today, and I appreciate very much a transition that's so smooth. It'll be as smooth as it can get.
A sampling of their public comments. Today's meeting comes in stark contrast from 4 years ago when Trump refused to honor the Oval Office tradition after claiming the 2020 election was stolen. The visit marks the beginning of Trump's dramatic return to Washington, joined by loyalists and a new Senate firmly under Republican control. Well, here with me now is senior Washington correspondent Mr. Kelly Wright. Kelly, you are a veteran of covering Washington politics. I wonder for you, what was the mood like at the White House, and what was your takeaway after the press briefing with National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan?
So if we go back to that video and we see the warm fireplace in the background, to me that was the takeaway, because symbolically we saw that President Joe Biden was extending an olive branch, if you will, to the incoming President-elect Donald Trump, and it expressed warmth. And during the news briefing, during the press briefing, Karine went on to talk about the fact that these two men had a substantive conversation on national security, foreign policy, what's best for the American people. And it was at least a 2-hour conversation between two men who have been staunch enemies, and yet they've come together for the benefit of the American people.
I know we talked a little bit before the show about national healing. That's something that we're going to have to wait to find out. I'm sure you're going to investigate. But, you know, the Trump camp is busy trying to fill out its incoming administration. Trump today officially naming Marco Rubio as his Secretary of State, Tulsi Gabbard as his Director of National Intelligence, and this new piece of news moving late today, Matt Gaetz as his Attorney General. Kelly, what do these names signal to you?
So Matt Gaetz comes as a complete surprise to many people in the community of politics. You know, Matt Gaetz is actually being nominated to head the very department that has been investigating him. And then you look at Tulsi Gabbard, perhaps a good fit for President-elect Trump, because she does have Army National Guard experience. She served in Congress as a Democrat member of Congress for Hawaii, switched over to becoming a Republican during the RNC. She will likely do well in that capacity with national intelligence. And then you can't forget Marco Rubio, the senator who serves on two committees, Intelligence and Foreign Service and Foreign Relations. He will do extremely well as the first Latino Secretary of State, and he will probably sail through confirmation without any trouble.
Certainly making historic moves, not only with Marco Rubio, but with women serving in his administration.
Absolutely, which many people doubted. And now we're seeing that this president-elect is trying to make some different changes. He's always been known as a disruptor. He's actually disrupting a lot of the preconceived notions of what he would do as president.
All right, Kelly Wright, senior White House correspondent, thank you so much for your reporting tonight.
Thank you, John.
While President-elect Trump was at the White House, 2 miles across town, Senate Republicans selected their first new leader in nearly 2 decades. CBN Capitol Hill correspondent Michelle London joins us now with more. Michelle, the final verdict came after a series of votes.
Yeah, John, in a three-way contest, Republicans chose Senator John Thune to lead them. Now, after the vote, he addressed the media saying today is a new day and promised an ambitious agenda. Earlier in the day, attention focused on the House of Representatives welcoming a special guest.
Ladies and gentlemen, please stand to your feet. The 47th President of the United States, Donald J. Trump.
A standing ovation for the president-elect on Capitol Hill as he visited GOP members for the first time since his re-election.
Well, thank you very much. This is a very nice gathering. Isn't it nice to win? It's nice to win.
Trump also expressed support for House Speaker Mike Johnson to remain in that role, saying he's with him all the way. Trump's visit comes as Republican senators voted to replace their longtime leader Mitch McConnell with South Dakota Senator John Thune during a secret ballot that took only a few hours. He'll be a crucial part of the incoming president's efforts to push through his policy agenda.
This Republican team is united. We are on one team. We are excited to reclaim the majority and to get to work with our colleagues in the House to enact President Trump's agenda. We have a mandate from the American people, a mandate not only to clean up the mess left by the Biden-Harris-Schumer agenda, but also to deliver on President Trump's priorities.
Meanwhile, the president-elect continues to fill out his cabinet with several announcements overnight, including one that caught a number of folks off guard, naming Fox News Weekend co-host Pete Hegseth as the choice for defense secretary.
The Pentagon likes to say, our diversity is our strength. What a bunch of garbage. In the military, our diversity is not our strength. Our unity is our strength.
That would put the U.S. Army veteran and Trump loyalist overseeing the Pentagon. Another surprise came when Trump named Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy to lead a new department of government efficiency. That appointment would put them working outside of government to offer advice and guidance on cutting wasteful spending. Musk posting on X, quote, "Some of this stuff is not merely a waste of money, but outright evil." Trump also nominated South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem to lead the Homeland Security Department, which would put her over the border, Secret Service, and FEMA. Yeah, and meanwhile, House control remains in the balance, although Republicans are only 2 seats away from the 218 needed for a majority. Having said that, there would be 2 special elections needed since current GOP House members Elise Stefanik and Mike Waltz are likely headed to the incoming administration. John.
All right, Capitol Hill correspondent Michelle London. Thank you, Michelle. Well, joining me now is Julia Manchester, national politics reporter with The Hill. Julia, what's your read on John Thune winning the Republican conference race to be majority leader over John Cornyn and what seemed to be Trump's favored Florida Senator Rick Scott?
You know, look, I think this was ultimately going to be a race between John Cornyn and John Thune. Absolutely, Rick Scott was involved. But look, Cornyn and Thune were, the closest with McConnell, and they had been in the Senate for, quite frankly, longer than Rick Scott has been. And they've, spent years cultivating those relationships. And we know that senators in general, they don't like being told by the outside what to do in terms of their internal politicking. And a lot of that was happening with Rick Scott. You had Elon Musk, for example, getting involved and backing Rick Scott. And I think Rick Scott also had a bit of a tensionous relationship with some of these members, including McConnell himself. So I'm not surprised that it was Thune. Speaking of not liking being told what to do, Thune has not fully committed to Trump's demand for recess appointments when the Senate is not in session. What does that suggest to you, Julia? It suggests that Thune could offer maybe a bit more of a measured approach against some of President-elect Trump's demands and what he's essentially wanting. I don't want to say that Thune will necessarily be a guardrail against Trump, but I think he will certainly be more prone to maybe push back against Trump on certain issues. I think as a seasoned Senate legislature, he's going to want this process to play out the way it has before. And in terms of the recess appointments and the fast tracking, that's something that's done typically in emergencies. So, right now there doesn't really seem to be a real reason besides Trump wanting to get his confirmation picks through to go down that route. I know you have ties to Florida, so I want to ask you about news coming out of Florida. What are you hearing about Marco Rubio's Senate seat if he is likely to be confirmed as Secretary of State? Yeah, so this certainly, knocks down a number of dominoes in Florida. There's a number of paths that, scenarios that could happen. First of all, it's up to the governor of Florida, Ron DeSantis in this case, to appoint a replacement. He could go a number of different ways. Right now, sources tell me that his chief of staff is the favorite for that position. He would nominate him or appoint him, and his chief of staff, DeSantis's chief of staff, a loyalist to the governor, would serve out 2 years until a special election is held in 2026. The attorney general, the lieutenant governor, they have also been floated. There's also the scenario where DeSantis could resign. The lieutenant governor takes, essentially becomes governor and then appoints DeSantis to the seat. That doesn't seem very likely at this point, though it hasn't been 100% ruled out. But the factor to watch here is how Lara Trump, the president's-elect's daughter-in-law, plays into this. We are seeing a number of members of Congress, including Alabama Senator Katie Britt, and also Elon Musk and his mother May Musk, pledge or sort of voice their support for the idea of DeSantis appointing Lara Trump to that position. My sources close to DeSantis say that he hasn't yet gotten a call on that yet.
We'll have to wait and see. Julia Manchester with The Hill, thank you so much for your time and your reporting tonight.
Thank you.
Coming up, from Europe to the United States, anti-Semitism is surging. A look at the disturbing trend when Faith Nation returns. Welcome back. The White House is urging Israel to end the war in Gaza. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said Wednesday the IDF has achieved its goal of dismantling Hamas and should allow displaced Palestinians to return to their homes. Meanwhile, Israel is expanding strikes against Hezbollah in Lebanon despite the U.S. pushing for a ceasefire.
From Israel's perspective, the military campaign will continue until the immediate threat from Lebanon is removed and residents of our north can return safely to their homes in sovereign Israeli territory.
The IDF is also continuing airstrikes in the Gaza Strip. Well, instances of anti-Semitism are on the rise around the world. In Paris, French authorities are deploying 4,000 extra police to keep the peace ahead of Thursday's soccer match between Israel and France. The move comes after mass violence against Israel last week in Amsterdam after a soccer game. And it's not just overseas. Here at home, shocking recent videos show Nazi demonstrators holding flags and shouting anti-Semitic slurs outside an American Legion in Michigan. They were protesting the performance of The Diary of Anne Frank, a play about the Holocaust.
We had 75 people downstairs that watched that play. And out of that 75, there was 50 or 60 of them that were afraid to leave this building. We had to escort them to their cars. Nobody in America should feel like that.
According to the Anti-Defamation League, anti-Semitism has increased 200% in the United States since Hamas's October 7th attack in Israel. Well, Ellie Kohanim joins us now. She served as Deputy Special Envoy to monitor and combat anti-Semitism in the first Trump administration. Ellie, welcome to you. First off, your reaction to this rise in anti-Semitism in both the United States and Europe, and what do you think is behind it?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me on and for your coverage of this issue. I would tell you that for Jewish families, whether in Europe, as you just covered, or here in the United States, it has felt like it's open season on the Jews. Certainly since October 7th and the massacre in Israel, it seems to have ignited a terrible bloodlust against Jews around the world. And unfortunately, right here at home in the U.S., I know for a fact, and some reports have come out from our own U.S. intelligence agencies, that the Islamic Republic of Iran has been funding a lot of the pro-Hamas activities that we've seen on our college campuses and in our city streets. The Islamic Republic of Iran is the leading state sponsor of anti-Semitism around the world. And so that has been one of the biggest causes. And sadly, I think the other piece of it is that there is a strain of radical Islam also around the world that we've seen with mass migration to Europe and the United States that is all too willing to go along with this radical philosophy that is Jew-hating. And so all of these factors combined together have created a tsunami of anti-Semitism worldwide.
How would you address a second Trump administration to tackle the issue?
Well, I wrote an op-ed back in 2020, I believe, in Newsweek, where I advocated for the creation of a new position, a domestic anti-Semitism czar, if you would have it. And the idea being that, unfortunately, we are seeing rising rates of anti-Semitism here at home, and we don't have a point person in the United States government that would deal with that issue. And I advocated for a whole of government approach. And I certainly hope that President Trump might consider creating this position out of the White House. And I'm not, advocating for myself for this role, but for someone who would come in with many years of experience. I would say, again, in a whole of government kind of years of experience, someone who could bring accountability to the Department of Homeland Security, to the FBI, to the Department of Education, and all these agencies that should be fighting anti-Semitism, that should be implementing laws and principles that are already on the books. But we've seen, unfortunately, a lot of lawlessness in the Biden administration. So that is one tactic that the Trump administration can take. And another one, of course, is filling the office that I was the deputy for, which deals with global anti-Semitism in the State Department, and that's the special envoy to combat anti-Semitism.
All right, Ellie Kohanim, thank you so much for your time and your insights tonight.
Thank you.
Up next, curbing the epidemic of violence. One Christian ministry's campaign to stop mass shootings before a potential killer pulls the trigger. Welcome back. Gun violence is considered a public health crisis in the United States, with some pointing to bump stocks as part of the problem. The devices allow semi-automatic weapons to fire multiple rounds like machine guns. Lawmakers explored what they can do to address the issue at a U.S. Senate hearing today.
The violence we see perpetrated today with bump stocks and autosears can be prevented. Congress has the constitutional authority to ban bump stocks, and Congress can grant ATF and other federal law enforcement agencies the resources to properly enforce these laws.
In June, the Supreme Court struck down a Trump-era rule that banned bump stocks, sending the political fight back to the states. Well, when it comes to school shootings, most attackers are young people struggling with mental and emotional issues. The internet often plays a big role when they research their plans. Now, as CBN Broder Carter reports, an online ministry is using high-tech search tools to identify potential shooters and connect them with the help they need to redirect their path before they pick up a weapon.
Given the staggering growth of these violent deaths, national leaders and experts often find themselves dealing with aftermath rather than planning on prevention. One of the more frightening statistics is the number of deadly mass shootings carried out by somebody 21 or younger. That's become a focus for the Let's Talk to Them initiative.
We believe that individuals who are both suicidal and have some deep-seated anger, maybe hatred, maybe vengeance, probably at some point will contemplate a mass shooting.
It's a morbid connection that suicide and homicide are the second and third leading causes of death for those between the ages of 10 and 24.
I think that a lot of people are looking for a mental health solution without necessarily knowing what that mental health solution is.
Jordan Estrada is certainly familiar with the issue as a first responder, spending the last 15 years helping organizations put together active shooter response plans. Using that background and experience, he wants to focus on prevention by connecting potential killers with those willing and able to help.
So Let's Talk to Them is a new initiative that is attempting to reach potential mass shooters, individuals who might be ideating or planning a mass shooting, with a message of deterrence and redirection onto a better path.
Let's Talk to Them started in 2020 following the back-to-back tragedies in Uvalde, Texas, and Buffalo, New York. In those cases, both shooters bought their weapons after turning 18 and used social media as their sounding board.
If somebody Googles or searches for any word relating to suicide, they have a response of websites to click into and phone numbers to call 24 hours a day.
Ken Churchill started Talented Ventures to help fund initiatives improving societal health like Let's Talk to Them. In this case, he points out how big tech search engine optimization on the topic of self-harm can provide help for anyone browsing the internet with self-destructive thoughts or questions. Compare that to search results on statements like, "I want to commit a mass shooting," where there's not one link to help.
And while they're searching for that, we could be searching for them and reach out to them, try to create a connection, try to engage them, and give them thoughts about other paths.
Today, Stark helps Estrada and Churchill try to better understand that mindset. The team is searching for content, media, blogs, and videos that might speak to anyone contemplating mass violence.
We want to make sure that it connects with the mindset of these individuals in a way that does not encourage or incite them to continue, but rather de-escalates them, calms them down, gets them to pause, gets them to think.
Let'sTalkToThem.com is the introduction page. It shares their vision to help. However, an undisclosed dark web page is now fully operational, connecting potential mass shooters with redirectional content and chat features.
At this point, are engaging with them and encouraging them to hit buttons on our website that make a phone call to 988, the National Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. But it's their choice to do the connection. The second thing that we have on the website currently is a live human 24-hour-a-day chat feature where specialists, particularly in suicide and other types of harm, these are Christian people, that they could choose to be in a chat. It's offered on our website.
The organization says this isn't about surveillance or espionage. Instead, the goal is to be a light shining into the dark corners of the web. Each situation varies, however, so police could potentially get involved. Estrada says the reason behind his decision to help is because God's love is for everyone, even some capable of committing mass violence. Brody Carter, CBN News.
Thank you, Brody. Coming up, a second chance at life spurs a modern-day treasure hunt. That's next on Faith. Well, finally tonight, an anonymous Colorado man is giving away thousands of dollars in cash all over the state. He's known as the Miracle Man, and he's earned over 100,000 followers on social media. Each day, he picks a different town to hide his stash of cash, then posts a clip on Instagram showing a recognizable location for people to find. That's not the only reason he's called Miracle Man. In 2013, he had a fatal heart attack and was pronounced dead for 15 minutes before waking back up. Now he's on a mission to honor what he calls his second life. And my question is whether or not he can bring that outside of the state of Colorado to a place near all of us. Well, thanks so much for watching Faith Nation. We hope to see you right back here.